we will call to order the Wednesday, May 26, 2021 meeting of the Diversion Authority Land Management Committee. Could we get a roll call, please, Don?
Mrs. Shirlene.
I am here.
Mayor Peterson.
I am here.
Mr. Grubb.
Here.
And Mr. Campbell will not be joining us today. Mr. Borboom. Nathan just joined us. Mr. Hendrickson.
Here.
Mr. Olson.
Here.
Mr. Bradley. Ms. Monjo. Mrs. Preston. Mr. Zimmerman.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome, everyone.
Mary.
Yes.
Mary, sorry to interrupt. This is Nathan. I got kicked off for a second.
Okay. Welcome, Nathan. Appreciate you being here. Then in front of you, you have your agenda. Are there any changes, additions to the agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
Roger moves.
Is there a second?
Bob will second.
Thanks, Bob. All those opposed say aye. And the motion carries. Minutes of the prior meeting, April 21st. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve them.
This is Corey. I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Corey. Is there a second?
This is Chuck. I'll second.
Thank you, Chuck. All those opposed say aye. And the motion carries. Let's move on to item number 4. Eric, you want to give us the property acquisition status report, please?
Yeah, you bet. In your packet, and I'll pull it up on the screen here in a second. The monthly acquisition status report. As usual, first page is just more to orientate everybody. Probably familiar with all that. The second page, page 6 of your packet, is the overall acquisition status map. And I guess not a whole lot of activity on the channel recently. We've acquired everything that's necessary for the channel construction. You'll see a smattering of the red shaded parcels. Those are properties where we have an eminent domain action. Down here in the legend, you can see the latest parcel counts as of a week or so ago when we put the report together. So acquired 573. We have, at the time of this report, there were 90 parcels that were flagged in the eminent domain classification. Just want to point that out. That number is actually, well, the number is increased from last month, but it's only because some of the parcels along Southern Embankment Reach 1 have been split. And so it was once just one parcel, but the property that we need for the project was split into its own parcel. And then there's an easement, a temporary construction easement needed for the original parcel. And so that kind of double counts a few things. And so that's the only reason why that number is increased. In actuality, the number of eminent domain actions has remained the same from last month, but just wanted to point that out in case anybody's curious or paying real close attention. We do have, of these 90 parcels, it's 28 unique property owners where we have an eminent domain action in progress right now. So 28 out of 570 some properties. You'll also see that, we continue to have the appraisal work happening on the flow easement study in the upstream area. I'll give a brief update on that a little further in the agenda. Otherwise, we continue to be in negotiations for properties, the Drain 27 wetland project, the Red River control structure, and then a scattering of upstream structure sites or building sites in the upstream area. And then we did get real estate drawings from the Corps for Southern Embankment Reach 2A, which is the north-south segment just east of Horace. So we're actively working in those areas. That gives you a little summary of the overall status. The rest of the map or the rest of the packet drills into more details. The map on page 7 talks about environmental monitoring easements. We're continuing to sort of chip away at those. Probably got most of the low-hanging fruit, and now we're still 100, and I think we've had a handful come in just in the past week, but we still have 120 or 30 of those left to acquire. So we're chipping away at those, but they're becoming a little bit more challenging. The rest of the report, I guess, drills into more detail. This sheet here summarizes those environmental monitoring easements. Southern Embankment control structure, red structure during 27 project are areas we're actively working. The segments of Southern Embankment, including the I-29 project. The upstream mitigation area, a lot of appraisal work there. Again, I'll touch on that in a bit more detail. And just again, we added a note this month. The parcel counts here exclude parcels in the city of Christine, since those both Christine on the North Dakota side and Wolverton on the Minnesota side are working to implement some type of ring levy project where those properties will be protected and not part of our parcel count. So just wanted to make that clear as well. And the channel work is essentially done. There's a couple MOUs that are still outstanding. But anyway, that gives you a summary. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Eric. Questions from the group? Certainly appears that we're making great progress, and budget-wise, are we about where we thought we would be?
Yeah, had a few discussions about budget status on the lands program. What we've acquired to date, I think we feel pretty comfortable. We're on budget, maybe a bit under budget. While I have this slide up, you can see that we've spent more than the budget. You could argue that the spent could be above the budgeted, but keep in mind we've got $16 million worth of assets that we've acquired as well. With that excess policy, we'll likely be moving forward with some sale of those assets. I guess timing is to be determined, but so I feel from what we've acquired to date, we've been tracking pretty well with the budget. So I feel in pretty good shape there. I guess as we move forward, we have a number of those eminent domain cases where hopefully we'll be able to settle those before we get through court. But in the event we're not able to, then I guess we'll be putting our faith in the court system and seeing where that goes.
Okay, Roger Olson, you have a comment, question?
Yes, Eric, 16.1 million in our assets. Is that a realistic number based on what we think it'll sell for, or is that how much we have invested in that property?
So what we've done for this number is we've given kind of it's less than what we paid. And we just used a uniform approach where we estimated the asset value to be, I can't remember if it was either 70 or 75% of what we paid. I think in many cases we're going to get all of that money back, but in other cases, we won't even get 70% back. And that has to do with, if we bought a full square of farmland and now we're selling back a triangle or something that's odd shaped, typically those go for less money. When we bought that full square, for example, we avoided having to pay severance damages to the triangle remainder. And so just because we might not get the same dollar amount per acre back doesn't necessarily mean that it was, we would have maybe had to spend those dollars anyway. But just to give you a flavor, this $16 million is estimated at a discount of what we paid for it.
All right, thanks, Eric.
And Eric, when do we anticipate that some of this litigation would actually go to court, if that's how it's going to go down?
Well, I'll give you a high-level answer. I see Chris McShane is on, and not to put him on the spot, but maybe he can help answer. Generally speaking, I know we have a number of discovery requests, probably just a small handful of those that have started. That's basically where the opposing counsel asks us to provide everything under the sun, and Chris and his team kind of, push back, and they end up whittling down that request to something reasonable. And so those are sort of happening in the background. My sense of things is that we probably won't have any real judgments until, 6 or 9 months from now, but I guess I'd defer to Chris on more details.
Okay, and Chris, thank you for joining us. I'm just curious then, how would that differ for what we're calling quick take these days? We're tracking two different groups, or where are we at with that? Thanks.
Good question, Commissioner Sherlin. The thing to keep in mind is that eminent domain and quick take are the same thing. It's just that quick take is a subset of eminent domain. So the deposits that we have made for quick take, if the landowner agrees with the amount that we deposited and never answers, then we're going to get a default judgment. There's, I think, 5 of those where we're updating the appraisal, and then once that's updated, then we will we'll move for default judgment on those 5 properties. But if they don't agree with the amount that was deposited, then at that point we have to have a full trial on the matter. And that full trial is going to be based on the court schedule. It's going to be based on the schedule of the parties and of their expert witnesses. So far, we've had scheduling orders put in place for about 2/3 of the outstanding eminent domain actions, and I think the earliest that we have a trial scheduled is late next spring. So 6 to 9 months would be pretty optimistic. I would think that the first time that we're probably going to have a judgment from a jury trial is probably going to be about this time next year.
Wow. So as far as getting any kind of an answer from a judge for guidance here is a long ways off.
It really is. And there are ways to try to speed that up, but the difficulty is that we have a head start with respect to preparing for trial because we have an appraiser on board that has already done the bulk of the work. Many of the landowners don't have an appraiser on board, so they're going to the courts and saying, I don't have an appraiser. It's going to take me a long time to find one. It's going to take them a long time to complete their work. To be fair to me as the landowner, provide us a bit more time to get ready for trial. And we're not going to push back on that. We're going to do whatever we can to accommodate the landowners to make sure that it's fair for them. If a landowner were to say, I want a trial as soon as possible, we'd be happy about that as well. So, we defer to the landowners and their counsel within reason on it. And that's where we're getting out to that time frame. The other thing is that the rules of civil procedure in North Dakota were recently amended so that many of the deadlines are based upon X number of days or X number of months before trial. And just the rules themselves build in, a minimum of 6 months before you can really have a trial if you're going to have all of those motions that you would normally have in a civil action.
So could you just give us a real basic outline of what the major differences would be for the North Dakota acquisitions? And then, we've got our Minnesota side that started to get active as well. What are those differences on the Minnesota side from North Dakota?
The North Dakota and Minnesota process is very much different. The Minnesota process, we will start an eminent domain action. We will seek to acquire possession of the property within 90 days after we start that action. We do have to have a court hearing to confirm that possession has transferred at that 90-day time frame. And then the other thing is that court hearing, which is approximately at 90 days, We'll also appoint a 3-member panel. They're called eminent domain commissioners or condemnation commissioners. And then those condemnation commissioners will have a commissioner's hearing. And the commissioner's hearing is the first step in an eminent domain action of determining value. So that is a time frame when we get to present our evidence of value, the landowner can present their evidence of value, and that 3-member panel will issue a decision. Either party can be satisfied or not satisfied with that number that the commissioners provide. If either party is not satisfied, then they can appeal that to the district court, and then it goes through the regular civil district court lawsuit process, which will take months, if not years, from that point. So the Minnesota side, most of those get resolved at the commissioner's hearing, but there definitely are some that get appealed to the district court. And if it gets appealed to the district court, that will be a jury trial. But a jury trial in Minnesota might be as far as 4 years off from the time that you actually start your eminent domain action, and it could be even longer. One of the tactics of most landowner attorneys in Minnesota is to delay the commissioner's hearing because they want the commissioner's hearing to be after construction has taken place, so that they can demonstrate how disruptive construction was to their client's property. And that's up to the discretion of the landowners, which they get plenty of deference in the process, and also up to the deference of or the discretion of the commissioners who get to ultimately set that time frame.
And one other question I have for you is the question before the commissioners or the court on both sides of the river, is that always a question of value, or is there ever like a question of whether or not you really need the land?
It's both, and they're two separate inquiries. And on the Minnesota side, that first hearing before the judge at roughly 90 days, that's for the propriety of the taking, or the necessity component of the matter. And if the judge rules in our favor on the necessity, then at that point there's a very short time period for appeal. If the landowner does not appeal that decision that goes in our favor, then necessity is just set. On the North Dakota side, there are two separate questions. One gets answered by the judge, which is the necessity of the taking, and the other potentially gets answered by the jury if the landowners elect, and that is the value. Most of the time, the court will address those two questions at the same time, which is at the time of trial. It is possible to address them separately, and the city of West Fargo recently had a situation where we addressed the necessity in one trial, and then we didn't have trials on value until 9 months later. So that occasionally happens, but that's not what we're planning to do at this point. For the most part, when we're doing quick take matters, we're depositing the funds, and the landowners want that money, and they should have it. We want them to have it because then that cuts off any claim for interest. But one of the stipulations that we put in place for them to get the money is that they waive their right to challenge necessity. So for any of the property owners who have taken their money, which is more than half of them, then that issue of necessity is no longer an issue.
And I just thought of another question. So do we deposit just what our offer is, or do we do like an escrow and offer 1.5 times or something like that?
No, in both states, the amount of the last offer is what would ultimately be deposited. So okay. North Dakota for a quick take, it's that amount of the last written offer, and that has to be deposited with the clerk of district court. And on the Minnesota side, the last written offer is what is identified for the judge. The judge includes that in their order to confirm the taking, and says that before you take possession, those funds or that dollar amount needs to either be paid to the landowner or deposited into the court.
Great, that's wonderful information. Does anyone else have questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. McShane. I appreciate your being here. All right, let's move on to item number 5 then, unless you have anything else there, Eric, with that.
I don't, but I see Roger
Okay,
has.
see, Roger, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, hi. Just realize that negotiations are continuing on these properties. And certainly if a landowner wants to come to an agreement, then this process is halted on that particular piece of property. So just because we're in eminent domain, we're not, or quick take, we're not negotiating.
Yeah, that's a great point, Roger. Thanks for mentioning that. We absolutely, have stressed that to our land agent team, and Chris would echo the same, that we'd much rather get a voluntary deal done before having to spend a bunch of money on the attorneys. No offense to those on the phone, but I think they would agree as well. It's better to get those deals done. And in some cases, we've been able to do that already. And I'm optimistic that, we might have a few more of those situations where we've filed an action, but then the parties are able to reach an agreement. So we'll see.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to item number 5, the resolution granting variance for the Cass County FEMA properties.
Yeah, I know John is on and he might be able to help add detail. I guess just to summarize this, the joint powers agreement that established the diversion authority indicates that outside of the cities, in North Dakota, the Cass County Water Resource District would own all of the property acquired for the project. This resolution is granting a variance for that in a unique situation where there's some lots that Cass County used FEMA dollars to buy out after one of the flood events several years ago. After years of negotiating with FEMA, and thanks to Mike Montpleasure and Nathan Borboom for doing a lot of coordination with FEMA, we did get FEMA to sign off on those lots, and they are held in Cass County's name. And because of the deed restrictions that come with those, the recommendation is that we proceed with leaving those lots in the name of Cass County rather than transfer them to the joint board. And so I think the resolution is more of a good housekeeping practice, and just ask for the committee's consideration of that. And if the committee is willing to make that recommendation, then this item is on the diversion board agenda as well for tomorrow. So, John, did I miss anything, or you need to correct anything I stated?
No, you did a really good job, Eric. This is a housekeeping item, and with just for future audits and reviews of our land acquisition process, we wanted to have this in place. So we're asking the board to recommend approval of it to the Diversion Authority Board.
And I can just add too that the county owns a number of these FEMA lots. If you drive around, we've had hundreds of homes that have been lost to previous floods. And so we used some partial FEMA funds to purchase those homes to get them out of harm's way. And so now the county just maintains those. I assume the DA would take over maintenance of those lots then, is that correct?
Correct. As part of the Southern Embankment, the authority will be maintaining it. During construction, the Corps will be maintaining, mowing as their contractors would mow the lots, and during the construction, and once it's turned over, then it's turned over to the DA. And
I know, it can be done that we turn them over, but boy, I know Mike Montpleasure's gone through this before, and turning some lots over to Fargo Parks, and it's not for the faint of heart. FEMA really has you go through a lot of hoops in order to get it done. So this is probably much simpler. Does anybody have any questions? or a motion?
This is Roger. I would make a motion to approve to the Diversion Authority Board.
Thank you. Is there a second?
This is Nathan. I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you, Nathan. Does anybody have any comments, any more discussion on this? Let's take a roll call on this one, please.
Mrs. Charlene,
Yes.
Mayor Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Krebs,
Yes.
Mr. Borboom,
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Yes.
Mr. Olson,
Yes.
Ms. Monjo,
Yes.
Mrs. Preston,
Yes.
Mr. Zimmerman.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Great, thank you. Motion carries, so that recommendation will go to the DA board tomorrow, I believe. Then let's move on to item number 6. And Eric, you want to talk about flowage easement study?
Yeah, as I've mentioned in the last several months, I guess we've been working with Crown Appraisals, and they're continuing to evaluate all the data on valuing flowage easements. Over the last several weeks or month, I suppose, we have created a special page on the project website. And also on that page, there's a video explaining the flowage easement process. So I wanted to just do a brief introduction to that for the committee. I won't spend a whole lot of time, but if you go to fmdiversion.gov and then it's just / flowage easements, on the top of the page, a brief explanation of why we need flowage easements, and then there's a drill down buttons with why do we need flowage easements, where will they be acquired, a variety of other details that help explain some of the background there. A lot of this information was adapted from the mitigation plan. And then there's a video that the Crown appraisal guys explain the valuation process that they're using. It ends up being a fairly long video, but the feedback we had heard from property owners is that they wanted more details. They generally understand the basics of what we're doing, but wanted more details. And so the video ends up, I think close to 30 minutes. So they can start and stop that at their desires and drill into more details as they wish. There's a copy of the actual presentation that was shared in the video. People can download the PDF of that presentation if they want to print it off. There's an actual sample flowage easement, and so this is the actual easement that would be recorded. Obviously, it needs to be customized for each individual property, but unless people want to read the terms and conditions of that, they can do so. A map showing the upstream area. So all the colored areas on here are locations where we need to buy easements. It's roughly 29,000 acres of farmland or area. There's a link to that map and then a link to the interactive web map as well. We have some biography information for the primary, Brian and Jeff as the primary appraisers, opportunities to sign up for an appointment with them, email those guys, learn more about Crown Appraisals and their credentials. And then this is a group of the 4 of the key land agents who are working with upstream property owners. And so we wanted to make sure their contact info is shown on the site as well. And then for those of you that have a good memory or have been with the project for a few years, you remember we did have Crown do a phase 1 report, and they presented that in 2018. And so there's some information about the phase 1 report. And then we asked Crown to update that in 2020, since there was a couple of years of new information. And so there's some information about the phase 1B report as well. And then a few links to just other mitigation programs, such as some of the crop insurance programs and the mitigation plan itself. So lots of information here, and perhaps a bit overwhelming at first, but again, we've heard some feedback from property owners where they're thirsty for this info. Our hope is that this site is useful for, internally our team, the land agent team, and of course the property owners who we're asking to buy an easement from. So one of the group or the committee here to be aware of that, and I guess happy to take any questions or comments if you have them.
Well, thank you, Eric. That looks extremely thorough. How are we getting the message out to landowners that this is available for them?
Well, a couple different things. One, our appraisal team is required to contact all the property owners, and as they had started doing those contacts, a month or two ago, they realized that every conversation could turn into a 3-hour conversation. And, we have a schedule we're trying to hold, and so that became a challenge. And so one of the thoughts is maybe if we can consolidate some of that background info into this website, perhaps that helps streamline some of those lengthy conversations. So the Crown appraisal team is doing some of that outreach to property owners as part of their appraisal process. Secondly, we have this team of land agents whose really their responsibility is to contact property owners, help share information with them, take questions. And so there's kind of this, sort of grassroots sort of army network out there making that information available. We have not done any sort of mass mailing about the site yet, but later this summer, we've been planning to do some additional informational sessions, not only about flowage easements, but perhaps about crop insurance programs and other mitigation programs that have been identified through the settlement agreement and through the mitigation plan. So they anticipate a bit more outreach here later this summer, and then in the fall or winter when the flowage easement valuations are complete.
So one of the struggles I've had with our website is when I try to find something, or when when somebody asks me a question about it and I try to direct them to our website, there's just so much information everywhere. It doesn't seem to be, easy. Is there going to be a button that says flowage easement information for landowners, or, something that pops out? There's just so much, I think anyway, just so much background noise on the project instead of what is really useful. I know realtors want to know from me, okay, how's this particular property going to be affected?
Mm-hmm.
And, I can't just tell them, well, it's right there on the page and there's a button you can hit and type in the address and there you go. Is this going to be really easier to navigate? Because I don't think anybody really needs a picture of me signing a document when they go to this website. I think they really want a certain question answered.
Two things. I know Jennifer's been working on an update of the homepage, and that will lead into an update of the full website as well, so that the homepage, focuses on something different than what you see now, where there's a sort of a news focus. But as we migrate into, more heavy into construction, the homepage needs to reflect that as well. So those updates should be available soon. I'm not exactly sure on the time frame, but I know that Jennifer's working hard on that with a team of folks. Secondly, if you scroll down on the homepage, there are some key buttons under the lands program. And if property owners call and they want to know specifics, we have the interactive web map. There are some, status maps, information about the ag mitigation programs. And so there are some tools available. I agree with you that there's a lot of information. We have a complex project. And so I think as the website gets updated, we're going to be working with Jennifer and her team to try to make sure this is as helpful for everybody as possible.
Great. Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments? All right, then let's talk about organic lands.
Yeah, organic lands update. So I think several of you might understand that organic lands was kind of one of the hot topics that we were dealing with a little while back with some of the challenges of project alignment. And our commitment that we had made was to offer to buy organic land early so that the organic landowners or the organic producers could choose to take those proceeds and find other land that they could establish organic certification on. That organic certification takes 3 to 5 years, and there's potential for an increased risk to their organic growing practices if their land is in the upstream mitigation area where we have some additional flooding. And so this program would intend to give them an opportunity to find replacement land while we would rent back the land that they currently own for really, I guess, as long as they prefer. And so I just wanted to give the group an update that tomorrow at the MCCJPA board meeting, we do have a task order where we're recommending hiring an appraiser to go out and value all of the organic land that's known. All of it happens to be in Minnesota. And so I think there's maybe 6 parcels or so, 6 or 7 parcels. So we're hiring an appraiser to do that valuation. They will be able to turn those appraisal reports around here in the next month or two. And we will be following up on that commitment, making offers to purchase that organic land. At this point, I don't really have a great sense of whether the property owners will want to sell or whether they're not wanting to sell. I suspect it'll depend on the appraised value, but nonetheless wanted to just share the update with the committee and let you know that we are proceeding with fulfilling that commitment.
Thank you. Questions from the group? Comments?
One interesting thing to note, if you recall, the project actually owns 2 pieces of farmland in Minnesota by Comstock. There are 2 quarter sections that were impacted by Plan A, and several years ago the property owner asked us for a sort of early sale of their early buyout of that land, and we obliged. And then the project changed, and so we do own 2 quarter sections of organic farmland. We are getting that land appraised as well, with the thought that we'd like to understand the market value of that farmland, and likely would run it through the excess land policy where we may trade it off or sell it off because we don't believe that it's needed anymore for the projects.
So is that included in that 16 million?
That 16 million that we referenced earlier was specific to the channel, but it is the organic land that we own is included in our inventory of asset lands.
So what do we have for total asset lands?
I think the number is close to 30 or 35 million.
Okay. Anybody on the committee wish to comment or have questions with Eric? Things are speeding along, and now is the time to question things, make sure that we all are on the same page as we develop these policies and move forward. I see somebody, Roger.
Yeah, I'm here again.
Thank you.
So Eric, since this land is in Minnesota, will we follow, the excess land policy we have then? And then it will be the Minnesota group that will handle this, or how are we going to do that?
Yeah, that's my expectation, Roger, is that we'll get the appraisal done, follow the excess land policy, and I think the policy requires that the land be officially declared excess as one of the early steps, and we haven't done that yet, but I anticipate that would be a step we would like to proceed with later this year. And then, run the course of disposing of that organic land. It is, a bit nuanced, and so I don't know that we need to bury ourselves today with those nuances, but I think there will certainly be time to figure out the best way to dispose of that land, obviously in accordance with the policies.
And we have had good success with our auctions in the past, I believe.
Yep.
Anything else, Roger? Anyone
No,
else?
not at this time, Mary. Thank you.
Anyone else? Then item 8, the committee update for the DA board is in your packet. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I don't think so. I just, again, try to summarize kind of the key areas that we're working on and, a few factoids and whatnot. So I think it's pretty straightforward. The last bullet point on here, just let the committee know that there's some work happening behind the scenes to make sure we're following suit with the settlement agreement, refining the mitigation programs that are really framed out in the mitigation plan, and then making sure that those are consistent with the settlement agreement. So I have been working on an update to the overall mitigation plan that will ultimately need to be reviewed, of course, and brought forth to the committee for consideration as well. But we're probably a month or two away from that. So
Okay, very good. The Cass County Joint Board update.
Yeah, Eric probably updated us on the lands that we've been working on and where we're at there. I think as far as the issues, I think an issue was solved in the Oxbow Woods, I'm going to call it, area, where there was some activity and a little camp set up. And it was on property owned by the Cass County Joint Board and the project. And I think we came to a resolution, and I think that issue has been solved, I believe. Eric, is that right?
Yeah, I think I think you're right, Roger. I think there'll be a little additional discussion just about how the joint board wants to consider controlling or limiting access to its property. And so we've had a few discussions as a result of this camp that was discovered sometime. It looked to be just kind of clean fun, but of course there's concerns about when something turns non-clean. So the joint board's addressing that appropriately.
Yeah.
Has there been any conversation with the sheriff?
Yeah, the sheriff's office was heavily involved in that conversation.
Okay. Because that has been an issue out in rural Cass County with, again, some of this FEMA property, especially when it's down by the river. It's very picturesque and great place to crack open a beer and have a campfire on a warm summer night. So, and invite all your friends.
Well, I didn't get an invite, but
but yeah, so it can really create havoc for the sheriff when you get these parties going out there, especially you get some underage drinking and dangerous driving and whatnot. So so how are you thinking of gating things or posting things, or what are you going to do?
Well, we're going to discuss that tomorrow. Actually, I see there's an agenda item. And we do deal with this on the dams that we have, the Maple River Dam. There's been requests over the years to do things out there. And issue there has been hunting rights that followed the previous landowner. Even though the Cass County owns the land, the joint board owns the land, the hunting rights stayed with the previous landowner. So issues like that. So we're trying to come up with a policy that we can make fit on all lands that we have acquired and have control over. So there'll be, I think, a pretty fair discussion, and I think there's some suggestions in our agenda on how we could handle that. And I think that will include the land that we are purchasing for the project. Now, people think that the county money and public money buys these properties, and it should be wide open for any use, and that just doesn't work. So there has to be some control. And if somebody's out there, we need to know, what's going on. So that's where we're headed, I think.
Sure. And I know another issue in my portfolio happens to be the sheriff's department, and mudding can really be a problem on some of this excess property too. I don't know if you've experienced that yet, but I know our townships get pretty upset about roads that get torn up, and I see people go off road and can really make a mess tearing things up when they're out mudding. So are you getting the sheriff involved in these conversations?
I do not know. I mean, he's been called when there's a situation, yes. But I don't know if he'll be involved in the actual policy that we'll try to put in place.
It's just a thought, because I'm sure they're happy to do extra patrols, which they have done in the past, but they certainly need to be aware of that. And it's a huge county, and we get spread pretty thin from one end to the other. So anyone else have anything? Then let's move on to the Minnesota joint update. Kevin's not here. Does anybody else want to speak to that?
Chuck, do you want to comment at all?
I could, thanks, Eric. I could refer to you. I don't know if you want to talk about what happened yesterday.
Sure. Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, thanks a lot. But the MCCJPA group has been working hard. The focus lately has been on parcels needed for the Red River control structure. And we have been able to reach a voluntary agreement with one of those property owners, but the other three have, we haven't been able to reach agreement with yet, which is unfortunate. I was really hopeful that we'd have something in place, but we don't. And so last month at the MCCJPA meeting, they passed a resolution basically asking Clay County to step in. But then the MCCJPA board advised us, give it another couple weeks to really try to hammer home a voluntary deal. And again, I thought we were really close on a couple of the parcels, but haven't been able to reach that voluntary deal yet. And so in an effort to try to stay close to the schedule that the Corps has requested for the red structure, we did present a request to Clay County Commission yesterday, and Clay County Commission did approve sending what they call a last written offer, and that's really the sort of the start of potential eminent domain action for those parcels in Minnesota. So they authorized 3 of those letters to go out. The letters went out in the mail today, giving the property owners a couple weeks to respond to those letters. And in the event that we don't get acceptance, then the resolution passed by the county commission yesterday does authorize Onstead Twitchell to proceed with filing the complaint against those property owners. So again, that's certainly something we take real seriously, and not a real fun part of our job, but I guess it's a necessary part to stay on schedule with construction and try to meet those timelines. So we had that meeting in Clay County yesterday. The MCCJPA board meets tomorrow As I mentioned, we do have this task order for the organic farmland appraisals in front of the committee tomorrow, or in front of the MCC-JPA board. So I guess there continues to be work. We're again focused on that structure. The rest of the activity in Minnesota is negotiations with upstream building sites, and I guess there's not nearly as much urgency or time frame on those, and so they're just sort of happening in the background.
And Eric, I apologize for putting you on the spot though, but yeah, it did come up, and we're going to still trying to work with those properties to see if we can acquire them before we have to, do the drastic measures. So, but yeah, thanks for that update, Eric. Appreciate it.
Any questions for Chuck or Eric on the Minnesota properties? So I have a question just kind of for both sides. Since we've had our settlements put behind us, and I assume there's been a lot of conversations going on. I know many of the staff have been meeting with townships and having various public meetings, and it sounds like, there's a lot of outreach going on. I assume, we have a new public outreach person who's not new anymore. I think it's been over a year now. So is any of that having any impact on any of these agreements? Because frankly, 1 out of 4 moving forward in agreement is pretty disheartening, that you have to continue to fight tooth and nail to come to some sort of agreement. That doesn't sound very friendly. Why are we still locking horns with landowners? And I get it from the landowner's standpoint, but are we just really that far apart on all of this? Are people angry? Is there something else that we can do to make this less difficult? And Roger's got the answer for me, I think.
Well, just a comment. Yeah, we are a long ways apart on several of these. And, our Cass County Joint Board has held pretty firmly on values, unless a landowner can come with evidence that the appraisal was not correct and certain things were not included in their appraisal. But it'd be real easy just to give them what they want, and then there wouldn't be any legal action. But that's not the correct way to use public funds. So as we get towards the end, and certainly the filter has allowed these last holdouts, property owners, to come to this point. And they've really dug in. And we take this very serious to go to quick take and eminent domain. We know it's expensive. We know that it's just isn't the best thing for either side. So to say that we're quite a ways apart, I would say we are quite a ways apart. And if we were closer and still talking to some of these people, I think we could come to a conclusion. But some are just set on, I think, letting the court decide what the value really is.
Okay. Well, I just, I just hoped that once the settlements had happened, that perhaps those that were, just philosophically holding back, maybe I was hoping perhaps there were more that felt like they were getting a fair shake, but they just didn't want to agree because they didn't agree with the process, or they didn't agree with the project. And that doesn't seem to be the case. If there was anything that we could do, to solve that part of it, if there are folks out there that, it sounds like you're doing everything you can, but, anyway, it just sort of surprises me that some of this hasn't gotten a little bit easier. But on the other hand, I know there were some easier ones at the beginning when, you know, it was pretty much volunteer buyouts. So I saw somebody's hand up, and maybe was it Eric? Did you have a comment?
Yeah, just gonna offer a few thoughts on this. I think what we've seen and what I've heard from feedback from land agents and property owners is there's definitely a realization that the project is happening. Whereas, a year ago, there was a lot of maybe thought that the project wasn't going to happen, and so they weren't going to even engage in negotiations. So I think we've overcome that for sure. But we still have, as Roger noted, a lot of property owners that are just frankly disagreeing on value. And I think it's really important, as Roger noted, there's also some folks that just said, you know what, I'm happy to go to court because I think you're wrong and you don't think I'm right. And so let's let the court decide. And they're totally comfortable with that. I think we're very concerned and sensitive about using court action, but in some cases, maybe we shouldn't be as concerned. Not to say we should just be hard, but so anyway, just share those thoughts.
Sure, I appreciate that. And again, Roger, I appreciate the joint board's, difficult task. And I do think it's really important to safeguard those public funds. So anyway, anybody else have any questions or comments?
Yeah, Mary.
Yes, Jenny?
Thank you. Yeah, I just, I have heard, and, it might be off base, but the fact that the core timeline just became so quick for a lot of folks, I think that, yes, people heard about the settlements, but that didn't really filter down to individual landowners. Like landowners maybe were hoping. So I think that's part of why you're seeing such a large separation between where we're at and where they're at. And for people that go to these meetings monthly, it doesn't seem like this is happening fast, but I think the core deadline to need to have those access agreements by August or whatever sealed down just really pushed people, I think, in the wrong direction.
Thank you, Jenny, for that insight. So, Eric, just to that point, are we keeping up with the Corps' needs?
We've been in pretty close contact with the Corps. As I mentioned, they had asked for all the property rights for the red structure by August 1st. Unless we get voluntary agreements, we're not going to meet that schedule, but we're going to be close. And so I've communicated that with Terry, and their design teams are well aware that, frankly, it takes us a year to buy the land. And so they need to have their designs complete and work that into the schedules. We've had a few laps with different design programs with the Corps, and I feel like that's better understood today than it has been in the past. So I'm more confident as we move forward.
Great, thank you. We're up against the clock here. Is there any other business? So our next meeting is June 23rd. We may or may not have that. This was, we just had one actionable item. If we don't have actionable items, I may just have Eric send out the packet so that everybody is up to date on where we're sitting. But I know this group has asked me in the past to please not have meetings unless we really actually need to have them. So that will be considered in a couple of weeks. Hopefully, I think we're going to start seeing each other in person, but it is my huge desire to be able to attend virtually for those folks that, for whatever reason, aren't in town. And, it's just great to be able to do it virtually. And I'd love to be able to do that with a screen up and, not just people calling in. I don't know how possible that's going to be with the access we have right now, but that's my hope. If anybody else has any thoughts on that, I'd like to hear them as well. So with that, does anybody have anything else? Then it is 4 o'clock and I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all.